Well, hello and welcome to our program today. We're going to dig into a deep subject today, and it's called Dogma. But before we do, and before we get started talking about all of that, by the time we get through today, we might need some peace in the valley. So let's start today off with our song, Peace in the Valley.
Well, I'm tired and so weary, but I must go along till the Lord comes and calls me away. Oh yes, well the morning is bright and the Lamb is the light, and the night is as fair as the day. Oh yes, there will be peace in the valley for me someday. There will be peace in the valley for me. Oh Lord, I pray there'll be no sadness, no sorrow, my Lord, no trouble I see. There will be peace in the valley for me, for me. There the flowers will be blooming and the grass will be green, and the skies will be clear and serene. Oh yes, well the sun ever beams in this valley of dreams, and no clouds there will ever be seen. Oh yes, there will be peace in the valley for me someday. There will be peace in the valley for me. Oh Lord, I pray there'll be no sadness, no sorrow, my Lord, no trouble I see. There will be peace in the valley for me, for me. Well, the bear will be gentle and the wolf will be tame, and the lion shall lay down by the lamb. Oh yes, well the beast from the wild shall be led by a child, and I'll be changed from this creature that I am. Oh yes, there will be peace in the valley for me someday. There will be peace in the valley for me. Oh Lord, I pray there'll be no sadness, no sorrow, my Lord, no trouble I see. There will be peace in the valley for me, for me. There will be peace in the valley for me.
Okay, after I get through with my talk today, and this may take a while, so you might want to make yourself a cup of coffee or pop yourself a bag of popcorn or something. And I hope I can tie all of this together in such a way that you will understand why I even take this subject on. Because it does cause controversy. And what I'm going to try to do is take the controversy out of it. But right at first, you're going to think I'm creating controversy. Because a lot of you are going to go, oh my goodness, Bird stepped off the deep end now, you know. But if you bear with me, you'll see why I'm getting into this subject. Dogma is the devil's best friend because it keeps us arguing with each other over subjects that has no answer. So if you love to argue dogma because you can argue it from now on and nobody can prove they're right or wrong and they can't prove you're right or wrong. So it's an endless subject. But what is dogma? Dogma is a set of principles that some authority claims is incontrovertibly true. And a lot of that stems back, there's many examples, but I'm just going to pick out one or two, particularly from the Old Testament. The Bible, there are two ways to look at the Bible. And there's called the Maximalist View, and that's where everything is taken to be absolutely literal. And then there is the Minimalist View, where you understand that it is a piece of literature. Yes, it was inspired by God, but it's still literature, and there's a lot of figures of speech. Jesus taught in parables. The stories he told were not absolutely true in the sense that it had happened, but it was in order to demonstrate a principle or teach you something, a lesson of a higher meaning or something. Well, in the Old Testament, the first 4,000 years of the Old Testament, there's no written history. So all of that, these are just stories that came down. The Old Testament is basically Jewish history, the way that they recount it. But most of it, there's no historical proof that those things took place. Just the word Adam, it literally means first man. Okay, well, first man could be the first guy, the first person. Or it could be first man in the sense that oftentimes we'll say mankind or man did so and so. Well, we don't mean one man, we mean a group of people. You know, that were, well, we're called Homo sapiens. There were hominids before us, but they were not us. They were different from us. We know this from archaeological digs and stuff. But the Bible really starts somewhere around 4000 BC. Well, we know there were hominids, there were people very similar to our, I won't say people, what can I say? They were beings that were very similar to us long before that. We know this. And there are people that Earth's been here 6,000 years and that's it. Well, I beg to differ with that, but here again, see, I'm getting into dogma. That's their dogma. But they're also selling books. And they've sold a lot of books. But I feel like that what happened, you know, in the earliest days, we were hunter-gatherers. Okay, let's go back to the Garden of Eden. Before they ate of the tree of knowledge, you know, everybody talks about it being an apple. It wasn't an apple, it was the tree of knowledge. Before that, they were just picking stuff off the vine. They were just eating stuff that God had put there in the garden. Well, we think of the story of the Garden of Eden. We think that it was a place, I think it's Iraq now, over around the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. We think that's where the original Garden of Eden was. But in essence, what the Bible's describing is that was our hunter-gatherer period. But when we started to gain knowledge and we learned how to farm, it even speaks of once they partook of the tree of knowledge, so to speak. See, here again, you get into figures of speech. If you need to believe it as literal, I'm okay with that, because if that leads you to Jesus and the love of God and all that kind of stuff, it serves its purpose. I'm with you on that. If you read a little more science and you think of it as that being where man started to, right about that time, man started to live in cities and they learned to farm and they sort of came out of the woods, so to speak. So there's two or three ways to look at that. And here's the thing about dogma too. When you're reading the Bible, there is translation. What that means is the Bible started out being written in Hebrew. But by the time of Jesus, the Jewish history had then been translated into Greek, because Greek was kind of the universal language at that point. And the New Testament was written in Greek. But then, even though Latin was the language of the Roman Empire, or Rome anyway, things began to be written in Latin. Okay, there was no printing press. So Latin became the universal language for scholars. Not everybody read back then. The people who did read, the learned people, they read Latin. And you could be anywhere in Europe, and your books were probably written in Latin. Okay. Then we get the printing press comes along, and we go from Latin. Okay, we've gone from Hebrew to Greek to Latin. Then it gets translated into English. And as of this year, we have almost 4,000 languages in the world. The Bible, the New Testament has been translated into more than 1,600 of those languages. The Old Testament has been translated into more than 1,200 of those languages. Okay, now, each time something is translated, there's a thing called colloquialisms, and it's where if you come from a certain region, you say things in a certain way that might not make sense literally. I'm fixing to go do something. Well, that means I'm getting ready to go do something. But what does fixing to go mean? You know? But those of us in the South, in the United States, we understand what that means. Okay. So we go from translation to translation from one language to another, and we have these little barriers that make it where it's hard to get an exact translation each time. Okay, by the time you get to English, you're 4 layers away from the original. Okay, how many times did something not quite get translated correctly in there? And now, even in the English translations, how many versions of the English translation are there? I mean, we started with the King James. There was a couple of others in there, but basically the King James is the one that survived all of that. But now you can get it to where it reads like a storybook. You know, I mean, it's very simple. I guess it's written so that children can understand it. I like the King James because that's what I was raised on. And it has that little, I don't mean mystical quality, but it has an otherworldly quality to it, you know, because the these and the that, we don't speak like that anymore. So you run into all of these, the variations, so to speak. Okay, is it saying exactly what it said back in the Hebrew? I'm guessing it's pretty close, but there's some little things here and there that are probably a little bit different. We had one discussion about whether it says, "In my Father's house are many mansions." Well, now we know that the literal translation, or "In my Father's house are many rooms." Well, what difference does it make? I just want to be in my Father's house, you know. I don't care if it's a room or a mansion or a cabin. But here's where I'm trying to go with this. I'm trying to help us understand that if we want to argue, okay, was the earth created in 7 days, 24-hour periods, or was it 7 very long periods of time? There's more than one way to look at that. And I'm not saying, here's what I also learned. I quit. I don't care either way. God did it like he did it. I used to say, You know, everybody talks about the Big Bang. Well, if you want to take it literally, it happened very quickly, so God spoke and bang, there it was. So why couldn't it have been the Big Bang, you know? But I don't, as a scientist, I have my problems with the Big Bang thing, you know. It's like, if Einstein's theory is correct, and we're finding some little flaws in it from all my reading and everything, but it does, as a general statement, matter is neither created nor destroyed. It just changes states. Okay, well, if that's true, then it always was. And there's a passage, I'll look it up and put it on here, but in one of the Gospels it says, in the beginning was the Word. Okay, well, if we're at the beginning, but there's a was there, that means that's past tense. I'm taking that to mean that it always was. You know, we can't understand that as humans because we're born and we die. There's a beginning and there's an end. We can't understand infinity. That doesn't make sense to us. And yet, we talk about going to heaven where we'll live forever. Well, forever is infinity. That's a long time. So, there are certain things that we just cannot comprehend. We cannot understand the mind of God. If he had tried to explain in Genesis how he did all of this, it would have taken a lot more than a chapter. And nobody would have understood it. So he had to simplify it into a story that we could somehow understand. It sort of happened in that sequence, but not necessarily in 24-hour days. Okay, well that then sort of lines up what scientists think they know. One reason I like science is because it is an ever-evolving thing. As we learn more, we change what we think we know. But you also have to understand that science is not always correct. You know, if you could see the map that the church put its stamp on back in the 1600s, and you were in deep trouble if you disagreed with that, you'd laugh. You know, they didn't know what they were talking about at that time because they'd never discovered the other stuff. So knowledge is it's an ever-evolving thing. It's a growing thing, you know. And the Bible tells us to study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. And what that means is, the more you learn, the more you will be able to discern what truth is. And believe me, in today's world, oh my gosh, there is so much lying and propaganda and stuff going on. Nobody knows really what to believe anymore. But the more you know and the more you study, the more you are equipped to not let somebody fool you so readily. You know, don't take people's word for it. Go check it out. You know, when somebody tells me something's fake news, guess what I'm going to read first? I'm going to read what they said was fake news because I want to know what they don't want me to know. Why are they wanting me to not read that? You know, I don't blindly accept things. But I've said this before. Truth will withstand scrutiny. That means you can study it, you can turn it inside out, you can try this and try that, but you're going to the truth will be the truth. It doesn't change. And the reason Jesus' philosophy is with us today is because it just makes sense. You know, I've studied other religions. In fact, even now with YouTube, I will listen to, well, I'm going to call them preachers for lack of a better word, because that's what we have in the Christian faith. But a cleric or whatever their learned people are that tend to give messages in their religion or whatever, I will sometimes listen to them. I want to see what they're saying. You know, does it line up with what I believe, or is it really, really different than what I believe? I find that we agree on more than we disagree on, just like in the Christian faith. We have over 900 denominations in the Christian faith because we read the same book and can't agree on what it says. Okay, that's where dogma comes in. Each of these little denominations, they have their own little set of dogma, and their way's the right way. That's the only way you can look at it. That's why it's called dogma. So we can argue about this all we want to, but I can't prove to you my way of looking at it is correct any more than you can prove to me. That's where faith comes in. I believe it was Paul that said faith is the evidence of things not seen. We can know things in our heart, and God speaks to us in different ways. We're all created differently, you know. I mean, in another Philosophiz'n, I'm going to talk about a personal relationship with God, and I'm not going to get into that too much. But I use, when I do that, I'll point out that it's kind of like a personal computer, a PC. Your computer won't mean anything to me because your files are different. Your files mean something to you. Mine means something to me. I have mine organized in a certain way. It might not make any sense to you at all, but it makes sense to me, you know. And we learn these things by studying. You know, I go on Google all the time trying to figure out what's wrong with my computer or this or that or how to fix my file system or, you know, I'm always learning things. But the Bible tells us to learn. It tells us to study. Now, and when I say all of this, I'm not telling you what to believe or what not to believe. Whatever your belief system is that helps you get to Jesus and loving each other, it serves its purpose. And I'm not saying you're right or wrong, and I'm really not saying I'm right or wrong, because I read every day and I study, and my knowledge evolves. You know, some things I believed 20 years ago, I don't quite believe it like that anymore, you know, because I keep studying. But what I'm trying to do is point out to you the many ways that people look at things. And if we sit in judgment on them because they look at it different than us, devil loves that, because we're going to start arguing with each other. We might even get to where we hate each other. Oh, he really loves that. You know, what I'm trying to point out, and I'm trying to get to where, if we can learn that, okay, if you think it happened in 7 24-hour periods, or if you think Noah's Ark, that was a real stumbling block for me back in my day. This is what's funny. Study to show thyself approved. A lot of times people wind up getting saved and believing in Jesus because they were trying to disprove it to start off with. You know, you go into it thinking, oh, this is all crazy stuff. You know, well, you start reading about it and you start going, well, you know, just love stuff's not bad. I think I'd rather love somebody than hate somebody, you know. And you start finding a way to believe it in the way that you can believe it, you know. I mean, but I got to reading about the ark. Turns out that the measurement that was used back in that time was the cubit. And a cubit was anywhere from 16 inches to 22 inches. It's the distance from your elbow to the front of your fingers. Well, it depends on who's doing the measuring as to what a cubit is, but basically between 16 and 22 inches. But the accepted figure is 18 inches. That's what we think a cubit is. That would make the ark 450 feet long. Okay, that's a football field and a half. 75 feet wide and 45 feet high. And then you get into there's a new group of people, and they're saying that the earth has only been here 6,000 years. And that we coexisted with the dinosaurs. Well, guess what, people? A medium-sized dinosaur weighed 5,000 pounds. A big one weighed 50,000 pounds and was 90 feet long. Now, how many of them are you going to be able to put on a boat? You know, so, but here again, this is just my personal belief. If that's what you believe, then, and it gets you to Jesus and the love of God, I'm fine with that. But my point is this, you know, if we can break all this stuff down, doesn't matter if you think it was 7 days or 7 bazillion years. It doesn't matter whether you think Noah and the ark was a story to teach us a higher meaning, that if we obey God, we will be rewarded in the end, which is really what that story teaches us, you know. Or if we can somehow get it to the point, well, okay, maybe the dinosaurs weren't here. Now we can get a whole lot more animals on the boat, you know. And I'm not making fun of that. Please don't misunderstand me. What I'm trying to say is, it doesn't matter which one you believe, as long as it gets you to Jesus and the love and us loving each other and caring about each other. It can be true or it cannot be true. It's not going to make any difference. So here's the way that I have learned to resolve it is, I don't think either way. God did it like he did it, which is way beyond my pay grade. The mind of God is way beyond any of our comprehension. So whether the beginning was 7 days or however many years, or whether the boat had animals on it or not, the truth is, the love of God is what that's what we're after, you know. So I don't see it either way. He did it like he did it, and I accept that. If it was 7 days, so be it. If there was a boat, so be it. If there wasn't, so be that. It doesn't mess with my faith at all for it to be either way. So I don't take a stand on it. You know, I let you believe it. Whatever way gets you to Jesus the best, I'm for that. But this is why I don't like to argue dogma. You can't prove it one way or the other. You do not know the mind of God. You cannot comprehend the mind of God. And we don't have any written history up until about 1000 BC, 800 BC, along in there. Now, yes, there was written history in other languages and other cultures, but the actual Jewish Bible did not start to be written down until around 800, 1000 BC, somewhere along in there. Well, there was 4,000 years that went on before that. So, most of that is oral tradition, meaning that the stories were told and passed down and passed down and passed down. So there is no way, there's nobody that can come up and be the referee. So you can argue endlessly on this stuff. And this is why I suggest that we don't argue about dogma. Allow the other person to believe as the way that they see it best. Whatever works for them. It's not going to make any difference in whether you go to heaven or not. What really makes a difference in whether you go to heaven or not is the condition of your heart and whatever gets you to Jesus' teachings, so that we learn to love each other. It has served its purpose. And I'm not going to argue with you about it. And I don't want you to argue with me, you know. But I've learned to take a neutral stance on it. It doesn't matter to me about Genesis. It doesn't matter to me about Noah. It doesn't matter to me about Jonah and the whale. It happened however it happened. And that is irrelevant as long as I love you and you love me. Peace is better than war, and love is better than hate. That's how simple it is. I say this over and over again. Jesus said there's really only 2 commandments. It makes all this other stuff irrelevant. Whatever you believe about particularly the Old Testament. The Old Testament was the old covenant. And when Jesus came, that was fulfilled. And what Jesus taught us superseded whatever went on in here, although it did line up with a lot of the teachings back in here. But he just simplified it for all of us. Love God with all your heart and love your fellow man as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. If we do those things, the ticket is stamped the way I look at it. Now, this is just the way I look at it. But this is what I wanted to go through this today, to help us learn to be more tolerant of other people's ways of looking at things. Don't argue with them about it. That's precious to them. That's their, a lot of us have come up believing certain things all of our life. It's hard to change that belief. That doesn't mean I'm stupid or foolish or anything like that. It's just the way I was raised, And so why would I want to, it's just as, another person's way of looking at this thing is just as important to them as my way of looking at it is to me. So I need to learn to be tolerant and let them believe whatever gets them to Jesus' teachings. If that is their path that it takes for them to get there, what difference does it make? Jesus didn't say anything about you've got to believe this a certain way or that a certain, no. He just said love God and love your fellow man. Pretty simple. Yes, there's a lot of other details in there, and we'll go over some of those things. You know, the Bible is it's your guide for living. It's your how-to book. And if you follow, you know, first of all, if you do those two things, then you'll get most of the other stuff right anyway, because it just, you know, it's a lot about how we get along with people and our attitudes and this and that. But those two things sort of cover all of it if you stop and think about it, you know. All I got to do to get along with you is to sit and ask myself, if we're having a discussion or if we're needing to come to some agreement on something, how would I want you to treat me? Okay, well, that's the way I should treat you. Comes home pretty quick when we start to look at it. Okay, how do I want to be treated? We get the answer pretty quick as to how we should treat somebody else. But anyway, I know I rambled a little bit and might have stepped on some toes here and there, and I didn't mean to do that. I very much respect your way of looking at things, but what I'm trying to get across, hopefully what you'll understand that I was trying to say was, we need to respect each other's way of looking at it, and don't belittle it. But anyway, I just hope that you can take away something from today's message just by understanding that we need to respect each other's way of looking at things. Whatever leads you to Jesus' teachings, however you look at it, it serves its purpose. And I'm not going to belittle you for your way of looking at it, and don't belittle me for my way of looking at it, you know. But study, read. I have learned so much from doing, well, back when I was doing the Friday night show. I learned a lot when I was researching the Philosophiz'n segments on that, you know. Over that period of almost 4 years, I learned a lot, and some of my opinions changed. I got a lot more tolerant of other people. You know, for whatever reason, as human beings, a lot of times we need to feel just a little superior, you know, like we know a little more than somebody else or this or that, because it makes us feel, what it is it helps us with our low self-esteem. But when you start to realize, wait a minute, I love these people. I don't think they're stupid. You know, I mean, why did I ever need to think that in the first place? It said more about me than it did about them. Because I was the one that was feeling like I needed to be, for some reason I didn't feel good about myself, so I needed to feel better than somebody else, you know. That's not necessary. I began to look on people with more love and tolerance after a period. And I learned all of this during that show. I mean, just the last 4 years. And I'm still learning things. I'm still working on that. You know, but I do wish people would study more and learn a little bit more about things, and don't be as ready to accept someone as the final, you know, whatever they say is true or this or that. I mean, be careful who your leaders are. Be careful who you're following. A lot of times what they're after is your vote or your money, you know. You've noticed I've never had a donate button on our program. I don't want your money. I just want you to love somebody. Be kind to somebody, you know. And the more I've learned that, and the more I've begun to feel that, after a while it starts to feel good when you love people, when you're kind to people, when you do something for somebody. I've said this before. If you're depressed, go do something for somebody. Be surprised how good that makes you feel, you know. And if you don't do anything but give somebody a smile, easy. That's easy to do. But anyway, I think we've probably talked enough today. But anytime that you start to feel like you're having a problem with understanding somebody or this, just have a little talk with Jesus. But we're going to wind up today with that great old song, Just Have a Little Talk with Jesus.
I once was lost in sin, but Jesus took me in, and then a little light from heaven filled my soul. It bathed my heart in love and wrote my name above, and just a little talk with Jesus made me whole. Now let us have a little talk with Jesus. Let us tell him all about our trouble. He will hear our faintest cry. He will answer by and by. When you feel a little prayer will turn, you will know a little fire is burning. You will find a little talk with Jesus makes it right. Sometimes my path seems drear without a ray of cheer, and then a cloud of doubt may hide the light of day. The mist of sin may rise and hide the starry skies, but just a little talk with Jesus clears the way. Now let us have a little talk with Jesus. Let us tell him all about our trouble. He will hear our faintest cry. He will answer by and by. When you feel a little prayer will turn, you will know a little fire is burning. You will find a little talk with Jesus makes it right. I may have doubts and fears, my eyes be filled with tears, but Jesus is a friend who watches day and night. I go to him in prayer, he knows my every care, and just a little talk with Jesus makes it right. Now let us have a little talk with Jesus. Let us tell him all about our trouble. He will hear our faintest cry. He will answer by and by. Feel a little prayer will turn, you will know a little fire is burning. You will find a little talk with Jesus makes it right. Now let us have a little talk with Jesus. Let us tell him all about our trouble. He will hear our faintest cry. He will answer by and by. When you feel a little prayer will turn, you will know a little fire is burning. You will find a little talk with Jesus makes it right. Yes, you will find a little talk with Jesus makes it right. You will find a little talk with Jesus makes it right.
Well, thank you for being with us today. I hope that I didn't get too far out of bounds with some of the ways that we were brought up to believe this or that, and understand that dogma, everybody has their own set of dogma. You know, you have your way of looking at things and your way of believing things, and you came to it in your own way. We all travel a unique path in life. No two people travel the same path. As a result, we learn different things. We come to see things in different ways. So learning to be tolerant of each other really helps us start to be able to love each other, and quit thinking that I'm superior to this group or that group or whatever. You know, it really starts, you start to gain a certain comfort zone when you start to love people. But anyway, enough for today. Be kind to each other, and I'll see you on the next program.